Welcome to this version of my ongoing series of chats about Florida Community Association law. This one is dealing with a very niche part of the practice, which most of you will probably not have to concern yourselves with. There are a lot of community associations that are what I would call distressed projects that typically involve a situation where the developer took title to the property. The vast number of these are conversions because they were quicker to get going during the boom, which ended about 2 years ago this month or thereabouts, or began to end. And what happened was the developer bought an existing condominium, an existing apartment complex, undertook renovations, and was either in the process of selling them or sold some, and it's now facing the situation where the vast balance of the units are unsold, and whether there were units sold or not, there are important aspects about continuing with the project now that we're 2 years down the road. And this video addresses those issues. There's a couple of very important issues that need to be looked at. One is that the law provides, if there's an existing project with an existing approved set of condominium documents, the dilemma facing a lot of developers is that on a going forward basis, 2 years have been lost, and that is the main crux of the problem. Why is 2 years important? From the first perspective, the Florida law says that when a developer creates a condominium, the developer has the right unilaterally to waive what are called statutory reserves. In a condominium, statutory reserves are required to be kept, well, at least required to be promulgated by every condominium association in the state of Florida every year, and must be kept in full unless waived by the members according to law, the unit owners. Every condo association is required to calculate reserves on an estimated life, estimated useful life, estimated replacement cost, and amount needed to fully fund the reserves, and place those amounts in the budget and fund them in full from $1, day one, in the new budget, in the new fiscal year budget. When a developer creates a condominium, the developer under Florida law is given the right to unilaterally waive those reserves for the first 2 years of operation of the community. Thereafter, the developer cannot unilaterally waive reserves. There has to be a vote of a majority of the non-developer members. So those communities where there are where the 2-year period has expired, the developer no longer has the right to waive those reserves, and those reserves then must be kept in the budget in full. The second issue that involves a 2-year period is, well, actually it can be even shorter. It really depends, but Florida law provides that a developer must pay, the general rule is when a condominium is created, the developer has to pay the same level of assessments as every other unit. So if a developer owns all the units, it has to fund the entire budget. Now, there is an opportunity that most developers take advantage of where the developer guarantees a budget, and the developer guarantee goes something like this. The developer says to the potential purchasers, either in the prospectus, the purchase contract, or the declaration, something like, I will guarantee that your assessments will not be above X dollars per unit for a stated period of time, and thereafter, or in exchange for that guaranteed level of assessments, as to the non-developer owners, the developer will fund any deficit that the funds produced by the non-developers aren't able to pay. Now, generally speaking, at the beginning of a project, the costs are somewhat less. There are obviously fixed costs like insurance, but there are variable costs that vary with the number of units in the, that are sold and occupied in the condominium. So when a developer has a community that is a year or two old, depending on what option the original developer took, and this also involves successor developers who step into the shoes of the original developer, like a foreclosing lender or something like that. Maybe a receiver's appointed, maybe the lender gets an assignment from the original developer. The point is the same, that the developer only has the right to have a budget guarantee for a certain limited period of time. Some developers even took another option, which says that the guarantee only lasts until the first day of the 4th calendar month following the recording of the declaration. Well, if the declaration was recorded in 2006, obviously we're well past that. So there is exposure for developers to have to fully fund the statutory reserves and pay budget amounts on a unit-by-unit basis. And in determining whether to carry forward in the shoes of the original developer or considering a new filing, say as a successor developer or a concurrent developer, both terms of which are the subject of another day's lecture or discussion. The point is that every developer who's in this situation needs to take a good hard look at what the documents that were approved present them, and then move ahead accordingly. If you've got a community that's a couple of hundred units, depending on the financing, depending on the state of the sales, it may be that you want to consider transferring the units into another entity and properly filing as either a concurrent developer or a successor developer, so that you can reset the clock, so to speak, in terms of the budget guarantee and the waiver of reserves for the first 2 years. An additional component to be considered is, especially where you're stepping into the shoes of an original developer whose engineering report may have artificially high or artificial numbers, well, let's just put it unreliable numbers, in terms of offering a converter reserve account. That's another issue, that if you can get a better, more in-depth view, in good faith, of course, in terms of what the converter reserves that are offered in lieu of a statutory warranty under the Roth Act, that's Chapter 718.600 Florida statutes. But basically, if you're a developer that's offering units where there's a converter reserve, you may have an opportunity to take a harder and closer look at the reserve report that was originally put together, and then now that there are 2 years or 1 year or 3 years under your belt, see if those numbers are accurate, and perhaps when you do a new filing or when a new development entity does a new filing, you have the ability to properly readjust those numbers, either upwards or downwards. It really depends, you know, because the building industry is obviously in a shambles right now. You may be able to, your estimated replacement costs for plumbing or common air conditioning or roofing may be lower. The cost of oil is higher than it was 2 years ago, but all the other components are probably lower. So that's an important issue, and you can really do yourselves a favor by carefully tracking where you're at. In a lot of cases, you're much better off in terms of doing either an amended and restated filing or even a new filing, depending on consultation with your counsel. And you want to make sure that you properly cover the bases so that you are not paying more than you're legally obligated to pay, and at the same time delivering a quality product to your end purchasers. If you've got existing purchasers under contract who haven't closed yet, that's a whole different story. Obviously, they're your main target. If you want to keep them, that's going to be something that you're going to want to address with your counsel and counsel for those buyers, because under the Condominium Act, in all likelihood, substantially changing